Senator Robert Menendez of New Jersey helped write the immigration plan and is also the chairman of the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee. Welcome.
Good to be with you, John.
Let's start with the immigration plan. Your own leadership, if you talk to the sources in it privately, say you have 50, maybe 52 Democrats prepared to bring it to the floor. You need 60 votes. You don't have any Republicans, and you've already lost some Democrats. So why do this now on an issue that you know very well, Senator, stokes so much emotion? Why raise hopes, for example, among Latino voters that you might do this? And why raise the ire of the right, who you know opposes this, if you don't have the votes to bring it to the finish line?
Well, John, I don't see it quite the way you see it. And first of all, it's a framework document, and it's an invitation to our Republican colleagues to join us. It's actually a process that all of the national organizations and immigrant right groups agreed with us that we needed something to get this process started. It contains a lot of the proposals that Senator Graham, who is a Republican, was talking to Senator Schumer about. So it's an invitation to say, come join us on a critical issue that is both important to national security and our national economy, and to a big part of America's population.
But you know the answer is no. Senator Graham has already said he feels that Leader Reid broke a promise to him on climate change, and he thinks there is no way that you can bring up immigration reform this year. It gets back to the emotions of the debate. You disagree with it?
I disagree with him. Look, I think what Senator Reid said is, I want to do both climate change and immigration this year. And of course, you know, I don't know where Senator Graham heard differently in that comment, but somehow he took that to mean immigration is going to come first, even though, you know, the majority leader said more work's been done on climate change, so that probably would go first. However, I don't know that one senator can reject an issue that is so compelling for millions, not only of undocumented individuals in this country, but for many of us who are U.S. citizens and legal permanent residents who are being detained unlawfully and against our constitutional rights in immigration raids. And what Arizona did obviously created an even greater groundswell of the need to make this happen, both in the national interest and security of the United States.
If you're right, and it is the right thing to do, both from a policy standpoint and a political standpoint, to bring this to the floor, you clearly need help. What is the stakes for the President of the United States? And before we get to that, I want you to listen to him, because he came back, made a rare visit back on the plane on Air Force One last night to talk to the press, and he said something where he said, yes, this is a priority of his, but he also said he's not sure there is the stomach for it, the appetite for it in this tough election year.
I know there may not be an appetite immediately to dive into another controversial issue. There's still work that has to be done on energy. Midterms are coming up. So I don't want us to do something just for the sake of politics that doesn't solve the problem.
The President did call a handful of Republicans last week. Not one of them said they were prepared to vote to bring this to the floor. They all said they wanted to see the final product of the legislation. I should be fair to them. None of them said flatly, no way, Mr. President, but they were quite skeptical of this. What does the President of the United States need to do? And if he can't help you get to 60, will you have the vote like you did on financial reform? Have a vote, have it again to prove a political point? Or if you don't have 60, because this is so emotional, do you say we tried, but we're not going to go through that motion?
Well, John, I think the President said something that's true about a lot of things. There's not a lot of appetite by some members of the Senate to go to climate change. There wasn't a lot of appetite for Republicans to go to Wall Street reform, and yet we're now going to Wall Street reform. So, you know, the bottom line is that I think that we will have moved the effort forward by creating a framework, including a lot of Republican ideas, and every statement we made today at that press conference was, we invite our Republican colleagues to join us because it's important enough, number one. Number two, I do hope the President will convene a White House summit. Bring from both parties in both houses, and the House of Representatives and the Senate together, to see what is possible to move forward. And so that's the way in which we move forward to try to create a basis to reach the 60. Clearly, if we're not going to get any Republican support, if an enforcement-only bill that John McCain put forth in the Senate, and with John Kyle, the other senator from Arizona, and with the public statements they made that they're going to try to organize 41 votes against immigration reform, then we won't see immigration reform. But we are not going to buy into the possibility that several senators who are interested in different elements of the immigration issue can't be brought together in common cause to achieve something that's so important.
You have a majority in the Senate, but you have a bigger majority in the House. And if the Democratic Party wanted to make a statement on this, the House could go first and pass the bill. But listen to the Speaker of the House of Representatives. She made perfectly clear she's not going to have her members take a tough vote unless the Senate goes first.
We have shared principles of securing our border, protecting our workers, enforcing our laws, and having a path, an eventual path to legalization. But the legislation will have to begin in the Senate.
You're very good at what you do, and I applaud you for it. But you have Democratic candidates for Senate seats who don't want to vote on this issue this year. She has Democratic candidates in tough House districts who don't want to vote on this issue this year. That's a fair statement, isn't it? It's
a fair statement. It's also a fair statement that there are Democratic candidates who don't want to vote on climate change in certain states with coal. There are Democratic candidates who don't want to be voting on a proposition that suggests offshore drilling in coastal states. There's a lot of Democratic candidates, you know, who may be worried about that Wall Street reform isn't going far enough to control the bulls on Wall Street. So all of these issues can be very contentious. And I appreciate what the Speaker had to say. You know, the fact of the matter is it's become well known that moving in the Senate on this issue is going to be the first step. And if we can't achieve the 60 votes, if no Republicans will join us so that we can get millions of people out of the shadows into the light, pay their taxes, do a criminal background check, be participants in a way that we know who is here to seek the American dream versus who might be here to do harm to it, then yes, Republicans will continue to permit a status. You know, it was my dear friend Lindsey Graham who said, we need more engagement by the president. And then when we get engagement by the president, he's not happy with that. So I'm not quite sure which way he wants it.
Well, as we test that one over the coming weeks, let's move on to another big challenge for Bob Menendez and Senate Democrats, and that is that Florida Senate race. Governor Charlie Crist is a Republican, but he announced today that he's going to run non-party affiliated. So he's going to go it his own. You have a Democratic candidate, Congressman Kendrick Meek. There's a Republican candidate now, Marco Rubio, who most likely will win the Republican nomination quite easily. Charlie Crist sounded a message today as if he was an outsider, because you know there's an anti-politician mood right now. I want you to listen to what the governor said.
They look at Washington, and they don't like what they see. They don't like what they see from politicians. They don't like what they see from bureaucrats. They don't like what they see from the gridlock.
If you look at a poll right now, and I know it's early, he's actually leading with about 32% support. So do you worry that he can pull off moderate Republicans, pull off some Democrats, and emerge in the middle by running a anti-Washington gridlock campaign?
I think Charlie Crist only is pursuing his own personal interest at any cost. This is an example of what's happening in the Republican Party across the country, where they're cannibalizing each other. Marco Rubio going so far to the right with the Tea Party element. You know, the governor not being able to win within his own party because he's not to the right enough. As far as I'm concerned, Kendrick Meek, who hasn't run statewide, both of these have been statewide figures. Kendrick Meek is leading a path that is going to move straight down the center, be able to get Democrats, Republicans, and independents, and for Crist to be leading only by that margin when, in fact, he has been a quote-unquote revered governor for so long is bad news for him. You know, this is about the Republicans cannibalizing itself. I think it gives Kendrick Meek a real opportunity, a young, bright African-American who has done a fantastic job in the House of Representatives to appeal to a broad cross-section of Floridians.
Senator Bob Menendez, thanks for coming in with us tonight to discuss these two important issues.